So I want to introduce the Boulder Company to you. They connect individuals to themselves, to each other, and to the futures of their organizations. Their programs are catalysts for the lasting behavioral change that empower individuals to communicate and innovate with confidence and power in manufacturing and construction environments. The founding partners are Ellen Feldman, Ornato, and Jenny Drescher, and they've grown Boulder Company from two friends who wanted to work together and loved improvisation, and they brought it now to the Car MBS stage. They're going to focus on the set of skills that they will bring to national and international manufacturers. So join me in welcoming Ellen and Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We're so happy to be here. It's like performing for bats. You know, there's just bright light and a lot of peeping eyes out of the dark. So we're going to see if we can liven up the end of your day a little bit, and we're going to begin with a question. The question is, I want you to go into your mind for a minute. Think about the team that you are working on, the team you hang out with the most, you spend the most number of hours with every day. And in that environment, if you could say, you know what, my team is playing to win every day, please raise your hand. If your team is playing to win every day, please raise your hand. Let's have a look around. Glance around the room. Notice if there's anybody else at your company that's like, maybe, maybe not, maybe, maybe not. Now, if you have an orientation that maybe the answer to that question is, you know, if every day of the week, my team, they're kind of playing to, it's more like to not lose. Raise your hand. If your team is, you know, going, I don't know if I want to admit that publicly, that's okay. So if you're confused and you're saying, wait, I have no context for this conversation. What do you mean? Play to win, play not to lose. I don't get it. Raise both hands and you're like, I'm just confused. What's the question? Thank you. I see a few people in the audience are saying, yep, totally confused. Hi, welcome back. You got our clicker.
Yeah, I got a clicker.
Great, we're ready to rock and roll. So what do we mean by this question about playing to win or playing to not lose? Every individual has a way of motivating themselves. We all motivate ourselves. We have an orientation towards our work, towards how we set our goals and achieve them, how we make choices and decisions. If your basic orientation is to play to win, it's more likely that those choices and what's driving your bus is coming from a desire to maximize your gains. You're more likely to take chances, adapt in ways that might feel a little risky. You're going to expand in the face of contraction, which is very different than, oh, better run away, don't know what to do. And you'll know that there's plenty. You have a baseline that says the world is a full and plenty place, and we can all figure out how to have what we need together.
By contrast, the play to not lose orientation and way of approaching the world and work is to minimize loss, to be very calculated in the chances you take, and to adapt in ways that are often incremental and secure. The whole point being to minimize risk and to protect and keep what we have. So it comes more from an orientation of fear and fear of loss, and very often from an orientation that there's not enough to go around.
Elle, can you give us an example of this, please?
Sure. In your workplace, you've received numerous complaints about one of your senior managers, specifically from this person's team. This is somebody who has a lot of institutional knowledge and is known for getting things done. The challenge with this person is his communication style is considered to be abusive by his team. He criticizes people openly in front of their peers. He pits people against each other, and he's often highly critical of the work that they do. In a play to not lose scenario, you only talk with this individual about his performance when the stuff hits the fan, when somebody actually files a complaint. Otherwise, because he gets things done, he's allowed to persist. You may even move teammates away from him into other teams with new managers, not dealing with the problem in front of you. Part of this is a belief that he's irreplaceable. There are destructive business outcomes that come from this play to not lose orientation towards performance problems. That team will lose productivity when they have a manager that they fear. People, they won't speak up. They won't admit mistakes. And more importantly, his entire team is a flight risk. So when we talk about this whole notion of how do we keep and retain the best talent, keeping somebody in place with these behaviors is working against that goal. And the bottom line is people leave bad managers, not bad companies. How many of you have heard this? People leave bad managers, not bad companies. Cool.
So that play to not lose orientation, its opposite is to play to win in this scene. So if you're playing to win in this scene, what you'll do is you'll address the problem head on. You'll do something about it with performance management, even if you don't have performance management. We've worked with companies where they don't even know what that term means. So they'll figure it out and they'll find a solution. This is a play-to-win orientation because you take that leap, you take that risk that this guy who knows how to do so much and can get so much done, that you might leave, that resource could leave, he could be gone. That feels really risky. But there are some positive outcomes that can come with that, including either way, he gets with the program or he's gone, which is more cost effective over the long run. It also can mean that it saves you money, not just because you're not dumping money into that resource anymore, but because you're no longer chasing all the effects that go with that money. Every problem employee or problem manager sucks up your time, your money, your energy, your focus, and they're poison to everybody that they touch. And most importantly, most critically, you send a very positive and firm message to the rest of his team and your organization that toxic behavior will not be tolerated at everyone else's expense. Because how many of us want to feel like, wow, they care so much, they just let him beat me up every day?
In our next example, your organization has gotten to a point where it's extremely siloed. You know this because there are hoarding behaviors going on between departments, both of human resources and of capital. There's bad juju going on between the departments. People are talking badly about each other and may even be blaming each other when projects run behind. In a play to not lose scenario, you've got a challenge because you want everybody to operate as a team, and you may even talk to them about we're all one team. But in a play to not lose scenario, you only want to take micro movements to change things. The org chart won't change. The damaging business outcomes that can come from this, though, are that you wind up with costly redundancies because departments are actually duplicating both tasks and people. They're also having very negative experiences with each other across departments, so that employees don't necessarily feel comfortable calling somebody in another department to get stuff done through them. This affects not only your internal customers, your employees, but it also affects your clients in the way that they perceive you and your internal house. And finally, once again, the turnover is likely in these departments because people don't see mobility across your enterprise. They only see it within their own department because they've been tarnished, the other departments, their reputations, and they don't want to work there.
Let's look at the play to win approach to this exact same problem. Instead of the talk track that you don't do anything about, again, you step into action. You step into action that unifies that team. That makes a lot of people sweat when we say that, because unifying that team is both scary, might feel impossible, and it's a huge risk. And by the way, it also makes a big mess. Break up the norm, and you make that mess, you risk flight, there's a leap there that most people are not comfortable with. But the good side of taking that play-to-win risk is that you get through that mess and you actually capitalize on human capital, financial capital, resources at a whole different level. You eliminate those redundancies. And the thing is, unified teams, really, really unified teams, attract great clients, they do great work, and they tell great stories, which sets everything up for success. It sets up sustainable futures.
Sorry. In our third example, you don't have enough humans in your facility to match the production demands of your facility. How you know this is that people are working back-to-back 14 to 16-hour shifts. People are not taking vacation, and very often, even when they're on vacation, they're either being called, or they're calling in, or they're doing their work. You also notice that people are short-tempered and may snap at each other, and you start hearing reports about stress-related disorders and seeing the impacts of the overwork in obesity, heart disease, and very often substance abuse and domestic abuse. In the play to not lose strategy here, you're going to continue to see how you can gamble with people's productivity, seeing how far you can push them. This is a real challenge because you've got the downward pressure of orders coming in and you don't have enough people to actually get the work done. So you put more and more pressure on the people you actually have. The challenge is that very often the response is, well, let's get them some pizza or bring an ice cream truck in front, which is great, except what they need is rest and more coworkers. And finally, Band-Aid approaches like increasing your safety measures, while a great attempt, only normalize further the overwork within your organization. The destructive business outcomes are that safety incidents can increase, company reputation can take a hit, both on Glassdoor. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Glassdoor, but it's an online platform. One of our clients, we showed them a Glassdoor review that said, "You do not want to work here." People go on and freely express how difficult it was to work in your location. Or they informally tell their friends, "I know you need a job, but you don't want to work on this team." And finally, absenteeism and turnover are just a natural response when overwork is the norm.
So what's the play-to-win approach to this problem? Well, Ellen just described some piecemeal approaches to some Band-Aids, little bitty things to try and show maybe we're doing something about it. The play-to-win approach is let's take on the whole thing. Yeah, I know, sounds a little crazy, but a holistic view of the problem leads to greater solutions. Is my mic skipping out? It is, I don't know why. I think I'm gonna ask tech people to work on that for me. So rather than the piecemeal approach, you're looking at the holistic approach. This can mean shaking up norms, which is definitely playing to win, because shaking up norms, say your typical solution in situations like that in the past has been, well, let's just work more. That worked in the past. No, let's not. So shaking up that norm is a big break in thinking for a lot of people. The other thing you're doing if you play to win is you're expanding your thinking, your creativity in the face of a challenge. That can feel risky and also sends a strong message to people that says, we're breaking from the norm because we care. So you can message it appropriately. You can open communications, add transparency to the mix, which is one of the things our clients most often hear as a demand from their employees. The benefits, the positive business outcomes can become better cross-training, better support systems, more safety improvements that actually mean something instead of the little, well, we've checked this box, aren't we getting better results? And did we mention more retention? If that's not a drum beat you're picking up yet, whew, welcome to the party. That's a drum beat everybody needs to be listening to.
So why are we talking about whether you play to win or play to not lose? What does that have to do with how you work forward in your organizations. As we talk with our manufacturing clients, they tell us their number one concern is finding the right people for the right jobs and having the right mix of people in their facilities. This is Jenny Drescher.
This is Ellen Feldman Ornato.
And at the Boulder Company, we work with organizations to develop the cultures and the climates that allow their employees to thrive, from the production floor to the C-suite.
We have a belief we'd like to share with you, and we invite you to steal it and run wild with it when you get back to the office. The internet and the information age is teaching us a big fat lie. And the big fat lie is that knowing enough is enough. We go to college, we get a box full of information. But when was the last time that you read a book on something and then became great at doing it because you read the book on it? Pretty much never. Right? Everything is about practice, everything is about experience, everything is about the doing, the getting dangerous, the getting dirty, the getting messy and saying, oh my God, I'm actually gonna do this crazy thing. That's the foundation of our work, and we use it to help people become powerful on the job, no matter what their role.
So if your number one challenge is attention and attracting and retaining top talent, you're working against a reputation for many manufacturing environments that the environment is dirty or unhealthy, that it's hostile to women and people of color, and that it's out of touch with present-day workplaces, which is not a good fit for the demands of our future workforce. They want work-life balance. Novel, I know. I think millennials are brilliant, actually. That they won't be treated like machines. They're future-focused. They want meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And they want to work for a company that they believe in, that understands what it's about. And then about your world, how do you do all of that? How do you make this new generational workforce happy? How do you blend the workforce generations that you have in a world where technology is constantly changing? How do you constantly retrain, upskill, and reskill employees? How do you integrate AI, robotics, and other forms of initiatives within your organization? How do you find your competitive edge? And oh, by the way, all your practices need to be sustainable. And this next generation is requiring it of you.
So what Ellen is pointing to, that you may have noticed in everything she just described, is that the constant is change. And the pace of change is accelerating constantly. This tells us that our need to adapt is also constant. Adaptability is as constant as change. Adaptability is our new normal. So what do we need by adaptability? What are we talking about? How many of you have heard this around town as a buzzword the last couple of years? By a show of hands, how many are you seeing adaptability? A little bit. Yeah, about half the audience. I can't see you at home, so I'm going to assume that some may have raised hands. What we mean by adaptability is, our definition is our capacity to adjust our thoughts and our behaviors in order to effectively respond to this uncertainty, the new information, and the changing circumstances that we are living in this part of history. LinkedIn does a study every year. If you've never seen it, it's quite interesting. They survey across the entirety of North America, and they ask employers, what's the number one thing that you need in new people in your workforce right now? And yes, you guessed it, number one for 2021 was adaptability. So what does this mean for us? Well, we know from our work in manufacturing that people will stay where they can make a difference, they can do good work, they can be creative and innovative, they feel like they belong, they have psychological and physical safety, they have their value recognized. You know their value, they know their value, it's a win-win, right? Let's just check that box on that ingredient. Here's another thing we know. Historically, the bias in manufacturing has been on technical, and did I mention technical skills and mindsets, full stop. Not on soft skills, soft skills. But here's the thing. It turns out that soft skills are what make adapting possible. Soft skills are also what make it possible to create these climates that people want to be in and are more likely to stay and thrive in. That kind of points to the idea that these skills are maybe not so soft, but more like essential for the future. Peter Drucker may be a person you're familiar with, kind of the father of modern management thinking. He famously said, well, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. You see this in your world all the time. You measure product, you measure process, you measure cycle counts, you measure finance, sales, production. 1,000,001 things get measured every day. So let's put the pieces together. We need to adapt. We have skills that we know help us to adapt. But we need to measure. Oh, wait a minute, how do we measure adapting? Good news. Adaptability has become measurable through a really exciting, pioneering new instrument called the AQAI. You may have heard of EQI, Measures of Emotional Intelligence. The AQAI is all about measuring our capacity for adapting both at the personal, team, and organizational level. We're not going to go into all of this today, but we'll give you a broad brush of it, which is ability. The A in the ACE model is, how do I adapt? To what degree do I adapt? What are those skills? C, who adapts and why? And E, that environment piece. When does a person adapt? To what degree do they adapt?
Meet Acme Widget, not their real name, but one of our actual clients. Here's a few statistics about them. They're an $804 million company based in Europe. They have about 2,000 employees spread over the US and the rest of the world. We worked with their US headquarters. They have a company-wide focus on integrity and credibility and trust. They create a high-tech product in the high-tech sector. We were invited in to meet with some senior managers of an engineering team. And as we sat waiting in the conference room, two men walked in, deeply engaged in conversation with them. And we overheard someone say, why the heck do I have to keep jumping in and saving these guys? Why do I have to keep intervening in these conference calls? I can't handle it anymore. And the other guy said, why don't they speak up? They know the answers. I don't get it. During the next half hour with the two managers, Ryan and Neil, we learned more about their team. The way they described them was that they weren't assertive, they weren't engaged, they had low morale, they had a pattern of being bullied and outvoted by a team overseas. They never got a word in edgewise, even though they were supposed to be leading projects. Because of this team was consistently coming in with budget overruns and they were missing their deadlines. We suggested that we get on a conference call with the whole team just for 30 minutes to get to know them. And on this conference call, what we saw was 8 blank faces staring back at us, almost without expression. They were clearly multitasking. They refused to engage. And in fact, the only person who did engage was their manager, Neil.
Let's step back from our friends at Acme for a minute. And I'm going to invite you to explore something with us right now. So from the comfort of your seat and in the quiet of your own mind, I want you to start looking around the room. And as you're looking around, I want you to point at different things and name them what they are. Just name them. Use your hands, point to
Screen.
things, and in your mind, name what they are. Do that now. I'm going to give you a minute.
Podium.
It might look like lamp, stairwell, stage,
Water.
timer. Point to things and name. Please do this now. Look around.
Everyone else is doing it too.
Everybody else is doing it. Don't worry. Everyone's doing it. You can do it without pointing if you want. If you have really great eyes, you can just go. I'm pointing to you with my eyes. Pretty easy, right? Not that hard. Let's take it in a slightly different direction. This time, I want you to do the exact same thing. But instead of naming things what they are, I want you to name them anything other than what they are. So it would look something like this. Fish tank, smartphone,
Potato
tuna
chips.
sandwich.
Ooh, we got potato chips and sandwich at the same time.
I guess we must be hungry. Go ahead and do that now. I'm going to give you a minute. Please look around the room. Don't look at me, look around the room. And name things what they are not. Name things what they are not. Again, if you want and you're more comfortable, you can point with your eyes. Keep doing it. I'm going to give you a little bit more time, just another moment. All right, shake that off. Everybody do this. Shake it off. Shake it off. Shake it off. I can smell the smoke. Happens every single time. I think I think the technical term for that thing that happens in your brain when you're renaming the thing is ah. That's the technical term for what that feels like. Felt a little strange, right? By a show of hands, how many people said that felt weird? Good. It's supposed to feel weird, because here's what you did. Let's unpack it a little bit. First, you had to notice what you know. So think about round one, right? It was really easy to go table, notepad, lamp, speaker, podium. You know what all those things are. They're obvious. They're baked into your knowledge base. They're things you know you have wiring that tells you what these things are. But in round two, you had to stop and notice what you know. Right? We don't often stop and notice what we know. So you had to do that, then you had to suspend it. Nope, 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 suspending it, hanging it on a hook. And then to make it even more uncomfortable and a little weird, then you had to choose to name it something else. So if you did that often enough, right? Fish tank, fish tank, fish tank, fish tank, fish tank. If I did that 100 times, I would create a new neural pathway in my brain that tells me that this is a fish tank, not a chair. That is where I'd be practicing that new reality until it took over and became my new default. So you've been practicing a skill that comes directly from our AQI, which is unlearning. Unlearning is about letting go and rethinking the status quo, reassessing skills, adjusting methodologies that are no longer relevant. Another way of thinking about this, for my engineers in the room, this is deleting old data and replacing it with new data. But the good news is that anything that is in this noggin of yours, anything that's also in your neural pathways as muscle memory, can be unlearned. You can unlearn information, you can unlearn attitudes. There was a bias, an unconscious bias session at a conference that we were at, and somebody said, I can unlearn my unconscious biases? We said, yes, you can. There was a diversity session in here today. We can unlearn things that we learn about other humans. So we can unlearn mindsets, skills, practices, approaches, attitudes, and most importantly, we can unlearn behaviors.
So what behaviors did the team at Acne Widget need to unlearn? Well, first of all, they needed to stop blaming other people for their lack of productivity. They had to change their default wiring that kept them silent. And they also had to stop being afraid of making mistakes. In the process of interviewing the team and starting to understand their dynamics, a piece of information dropped in. Remember this guy? Turns out that their manager, previous to Ryan and Neil, had been verbally abusive, had called them out for making mistakes, and had basically beaten them about the head and shoulders until they stopped speaking up. So they also had that emotional challenge to overcome. They took ownership, though. Learning emotional intelligence, they dove into assertive communication, they energized themselves engaging in exercises that focused on spontaneity and flexibility. They lightened up with each other, and they got much more comfortable with risk and failure.
Can you go back one?
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry. So I'm going to ask you now to shut your eyes. Don't worry, nobody's going to come up and sneak up behind you and tickle you or anything like that. But the reason I want you to close your eyes is because for a moment, I just want you to hear only auditory input. Let's just shut off all other inputs that you may have right now. And I'm going to read something aloud to you, and I want you to listen really carefully. And while you're listening, I want you to ask the question of yourself, is this my team environment? Team support refers to the team environment in which employees feel they can share new knowledge, are supported through challenges, and feel they can openly discuss opinions. Is this your team environment? I want you to sit with that question for a moment. Is your team environment one where we share knowledge, support each other through challenges, and openly discuss opinions and ideas? You can open your eyes. Thank you for taking that moment of reflection. We invite you to take that with you. The team's support comes from the environment section, the E of the ACE model of the AQAI.
When we showed this slide to the team in Acme Widget, they said, that's us. They recognized right away that they were acting as sole contributors instead of members of a team. They didn't share information. They didn't provide critical feedback. If they saw somebody was doing something wrong, they would just hold back. They avoided conflict like the plague. As you can imagine, they needed to overcome those behaviors in order to start acting in a way where people felt supported on their team, and they did. What happened as a result of them engaging and learning together is they started to collaborate in much more meaningful ways. They pre-planned their meetings with the team in Europe so that they had better outcomes. They stood up for each other, right? They were organized going into these meetings. The other thing they did is they learned how to delegate effectively, not only with their team across the pond, but with each other. They had actual complete handoffs between one person and another instead of doing what we call drive-by delegation. Any of you familiar with that term? Any of you the victim of that term? Drive-by delegation. Here, I have something for you to do. Here you go. All right. The most important thing is they leaned into their problems together. They actually not only leaned into their problems, but they leaned into problem solving. And they would take it on like a game and actually make it meaningful for everyone to be in the room so that they would learn together.
Speaking of games, we have one more exercise for you to do today. So, many of you in this room probably played this game when you were growing up, but I'm going to teach it because there are visitors from other countries in this room, and I want to make sure that everybody knows how to play. So this game is called rock, paper, scissors. So it has 3 components.
Sorry.
Rock. Everyone do this with me. Let's make sure we know. So this is rock, this is paper, and this component is scissors. So this game will be played in pairs. In a moment, I'm going to instruct you on how to pair up since you're scattered about the room. And the way this is going to work is that we're just going to play 3 very quick rounds. And there will be a point, I promise. So the way we play is rock beats scissors. Paper covers rock, so that wins as well. Scissors cut paper, so I win. So if we happen to put the same thing out at the same time, it's a tie. So you're going to do this to a best of 3. So you count 1, 2, 3, and then each player is going to put one of those 3 items out. If you're not familiar with this, don't worry. You're still going to have some fun playing the game. So we're going to invite you, since you're scattered, to just find a partner quickly and quietly. And you're going to play for probably less than a minute, and we'll know you're done because when you're done, you're going to sit back and fold your arms and relax, and that's going to show us that you're done. Go ahead and play that game now. Find a partner. Tie. 1, 2, 3.
Remember to cross your arms if you're done, so we know you're done.
All right, we'll know you're done because you're gonna do this. You're gonna take on this stance of like, what was that crazy game all about? That's what this stance is for. So here's our next question for you. How did you play? If you noticed yourself having some thoughts like, well, this is ridiculous, this is a serious conference. I don't want to do that, I don't want to look weird. I'm going to look like a fool, and yet I'm not prepared to look like an idiot in front of these people. Oh my God, that's my boss. What if I beat my boss at rock, paper, scissors? Then I'm going to feel bad. If I win, I'll feel bad. If I beat my boss, I'll feel bad. Oh my God.
Oh, stop it. Playing to not lose. That's what that sounds like
that's
to me.
what's playing. Yeah, that's what that is. But if you're going, you know what? I have no idea. It's 4 o'clock. I know I'm really close to wine. I'm game to just like play. What's here? What are we doing? What's this about? Why? If you took that leap, if you took that risk, that's more of a play to win orientation. So I want you to take a quick second and stop and reflect on how you played in that game. Did I play to win? Did I play to not lose? What was I thinking? There's an interesting thing that happens. So what we're talking about here from our AQAI is the character dimension, which is about how we motivate ourselves and how we work towards important goals. Talks about how we adapt differently based on that particular style. Neither style is good nor bad. It's about the noticing. It's about paying attention to what is my more dominant style and how is that showing up for me when I'm leading my team, or if I'm not a leader, if I'm just going to work every day and looking to perform. What we see over and over again is that when we ask teams and leaders, so do you think you're playing to win or are you playing to not lose? They go, oh yeah, we're playing to win. Yeah, we're playing to win every time. Yeah, Then we get kind of into the mix with them. Just like you may have gotten into the mix and noticed just now how you were really playing or not. And what happens is that we uncover what we call the aspiration gap. So everybody take a hand and put it up here, take a hand and put it down here. Let's see, hand up, hand down. This hand right up here, this is who you want to be. This is who you're out to become. This is your aspirational you, right? Say, hey, I love you, aspirational you. You are awesome. This is who you're being now. This is who you're being. This is what you're doing. This is your mindset that is current.
That's your actual you.
The actual you. So the way to close this gap, close the gap with me, close the gap, close the gap. What we're doing on this closing process is we're doing action. We're doing experience, we're trying, we're failing. We're picking ourselves back up. We're doing the doing part. Instead of just reading that book about listening, we're making ourselves shut up and listen in situations where normally we want to overtalk. It's that kind of action and practice that helps us to close that aspiration gap.
Fear was driving the bus for the team at Acme Widget. They were play to not lose all day. Their motivation style was avoid conflict at every turn, cover your losses, do your own work. It wasn't working for them, but that was clearly the motivation style. Over time, and with effort on their part, they learned to leverage their strengths. They got much better at understanding what each member of their team was great at and amplifying that. They connected to a team why, and when there was push came to shove, they looked at what is our team goal and how do we need to realign our priorities to reach it. And because of that, they completed projects on budget and on time. Innovation became a norm for them because they had the freedom and the trust in one another to actually get things done through each other, and they could question each other without questioning the relationships. So important. This innovation team started to thrive.
So lean in. I have something important to tell you. Come on, lean in. Here's the big irony. This was the innovation team.
True story.
They finally started innovating. So we opened this conversation with you with this question about playing to win, playing to not lose in your world, on your team. So our call for you today coming out of this conversation is to consider, what would it look like for me and my team if we really were playing to win in our group?
And what's one specific thing that you can do tomorrow or the next day to move your team in the direction of playing to win?
Join us. I see Carla's all ready to join us.
Carla, join us.
Join us, because we're out to inspire and empower every person with the skills and the mindsets of adaptability so that we can all thrive together.
Ensuring that no one is left behind in the fastest period of growth in the history of the world. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. I'm going to sit over here.
Great.
Sure.
That was fabulous. Thank you. And I have one question for you first, and that is, can you please go talk to the Detroit Lions and Detroit Tigers? Because I don't think they ever play to win.
We'd be happy to talk with the
Did
Detroit
anybody watch
Lions.
the game last night, the Tigers game, till it ended, really, in the 10th?
Well, I'm from New England. We had that problem in Boston for a very long time.
So I want to remind everybody, you do have the Swap Card app. You can put questions in here. I have several, but if you have some, please, I'll try to take them from there. I do know how to use the app. I am technically sort of astute. So I have tons of questions.
Yay.
And I know I won't get through all of them, but you talked about somebody being irreplaceable. Why do we think someone's irreplaceable? And if they're a good leader, don't good leaders realize they can be gone tomorrow and everything should be fine? They should have set the organization that way. Why do we get ourselves in these ruts where we say we can't lose that person?
I have thoughts on this. Do you have thoughts on this?
Go ahead and start on your thoughts.
All right, I'll start on my thoughts. So my thoughts are, we mentioned that there's this lie that we're all believing, that information is everything, that your degree, that everything is about your degree. And so I think that spills over into technical knowledge. Well, he's the only person that knows how to run this machine. He's the only person that has this exact background. He's the only person that can do X, Y, Z things. And I think over time it just becomes tunnel vision, where it's easier to think, oh, well, look, he checks all these boxes along the way, right? So I think it becomes somewhat a habit of thinking, which again can be interrupted, and we can challenge our own thinking around that and say, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's just a thought habit that I have. Because to your point about leaders, good leaders should realize that they can be replaced tomorrow. But that is, I think, a unique perspective that not enough leaders have. Not enough leaders realize that they're there to serve other people. There's not nearly enough of that.
So
I also
to change
think, Carla,
belief?
that
Go ahead.
comes from, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It comes from that place of not wanting to upset the apple cart, because someone is doing the calculus that if we lose this person, it's going to have this cascading effect across, and it's going to affect this and this and this and this. And that may be true for a period of time, right? But what we've seen in a couple organizations, we work with municipalities as well. They kept a really abusive supervisor in place for a year and a half. We probably had a half a dozen conversations with the HR department. In that time, they lost 6 new people that they had. Is it expensive to hire people, folks? To find the right person, to hire them, to onboard them, to get them set up with medical coverage and all of that stuff. And then to have people churning through the turnstile because they weren't addressing what was a clear and present danger to the whole thing because he had seniority and a lot of experience.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something good for us all to think about whenever we think about, oh, we can't lose that person.
Yeah.
If they are a cancer in our organization, we have to remove it.
Yep.
No
Actually,
matter.
you just made me think of something, Carla, which is there is an organization that we're presently working with where one of their salespeople is unbelievably toxic. He's poison to the whole team. I actually had this happen about 2 weeks ago where we were doing a Zoom session on some skill building. And there was a new person, it was literally her 4th day on the job. And this toxic member of this team started going off on a tear about all the things he disagrees about this, that, and the other thing of the work we were doing to help them improve their communications in front of a person who'd been with the company for 4 days. Put yourself in that woman's shoes right now. And imagine how you're thinking and how you're feeling. I had to go and report this back to the leader. I said, why are you keeping this guy? And he says, well, nobody else can sell like him. I said, you know what? Find somebody who can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Salespeople are everywhere. I was in sales for years.
Great story. So I have another question. It's a 2-parter. And I first wrote the first part when I saw the silos. Because when I saw the silos, I immediately thought about how people are graded and the incentives that we put in organizations, the objectives that we put in department by department. And then I thought about how that translates into how we think about succession.
Yes.
And then I heard your talk about soft skills. When we look at succession and do the check boxes, they're delivering on objectives. Did they meet this goal? Did they go to this training? Did we do this? We don't talk about, does that person have compassion? Do they try to understand their staff members? How should we be changing our evaluation systems? Do we need to change them so that we can actually incentivize the kind of behavior that we want?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you asked that because one of the things that we're seeing with a lot of the companies that we work with is that there's a sea change happening right now. That their most senior leaders were likely trained by people from the World War II generation, which is very regimented and very sort of do what I said kind of way of managing, right? So as those folks are leaving the workforce, the next generation behind them was trained by those folks. And they're in a position of really needing to change the way that they think about managing people. If they've gotten any management training at all, it should be oriented towards how do I resonate with the future workforce? Not necessarily just younger, but the future workforce that we talked about. The skills of emotional intelligence, the skills of understanding personality style and effective communication and real listening that support diversity initiatives and things like that are the metrics that we should be looking for in individuals. Because as you know, as you rise up in an organization, it's less about what you know technically and more about how you deal with people. And so the performance management, performance evaluation standards do need to shift in terms of what we value.
For sure.
Yep.
I still don't see any questions from the audience, so I've got more.
Yay.
When we were talking about unification and getting rid of silos, I think you know that a lot of companies today are choosing to separate themselves. Ford just did it with Ford Blue, kind of old Ford, new Ford. And then you've got other companies like GM that are saying, we're not doing that. Everybody needs to work on electrification. What's your view? Or do you think time will tell? You know, which way makes sense?
On those specific examples,
yes,
or on?
Or just in general, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
companies splitting and there's a lot of companies saying we're not gonna. Any view on what that will do for your silos and unification?
We look at how effective is the organization through the lens of, are you familiar with the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? Patrick Lencioni wrote.
What's the name of the book again?
5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Maybe we can put that reference out for everybody afterwards.
And what he looks at in that is organizations need to start with trust, deal effectively with conflict, make commitments to each other, build in accountability, and work towards team results. In a siloed organization, it's really difficult to build that trust across the silos. It's like, how can you have that happen if people are fighting over resources and the way that they're being evaluated is based on how they keep the resources to themselves and use it best, which it hampers them sharing, hampers collaboration. So I don't know in an organization that's enormous. I can tell you that in the medium-sized organizations that we work with, when they embrace this 5 behaviors approach, they're much better at breaking down the silos.
Okay.
They work more collaboratively with each other.
Another word that comes to mind, and this is going to sound a little funny, but the word mindful is what comes to mind. I think it's less about can we or can't we, and it's more about what is the approach we're taking. Are we paying attention to enough of the details? I'm thinking about a client of ours who was literally siloed across multiple buildings in their plant, and each plant had its own personality. Anybody who's worked in multiple plant environments, you know this is a standard thing. So creating great team function inside, honoring the climate of each individual plant is something that they've been working on. So they are technically still siloed, but because they're learning how to collaborate and they're making these ongoing changes in a way that is mindful and really digs below the surface, they're able to have the process of remaining separated still be something where they're unified, they're still pointing towards the same thing, and they're not working at cross purposes. I think that's a lot of what it is where are you working at cross purposes? Where do you have divergence of, say, development versus production in different plants, or if you're a plant where both of those things are under one roof, making it work together is a mindful process.
Sure. Makes sense. One last question for you. When you talked about unlearning, I immediately thought about learning a new language. But in that case, I know that I didn't know what chair was in German till I learned it, or floor in whatever language. I knew I didn't know that. But to unlearn, you have to know what you need to unlearn.
Yes.
So how do you go about discovering what that is? You know, as I was listening to you, I thought I was a good manager, but I realized there are things I can definitely do to improve. But how do you realize these are the areas I need to improve? I need to unlearn that behavior.
Right.
How does anybody get that?
Yeah, it's so
that
automated.
You as soon as you start to do it, you stop and go, oh, I can't do that. Right? Yeah. How do you get to that point? How do you get that kind of self-recognition? Sometimes you can get it from people around you looking at you going, what are you doing? But I mean, sometimes, your staff is just like this. So how do you unlearn?
So one of my favorite tricks, and we do this with clients on teams, is we stop and look at what is any one trouble spot that is happening on the team. We'll dig into one trouble spot. So an example of this would be this team, same team that I was just mentioning actually, they are having a problem putting all of their notes in one place together. Their project notes are going scattered to the four winds, and they get frustrated and they get annoyed with each other and they blame each other. They start playing the blame game. There's a lot of agita about it. So we looked at just that one problem and we asked them, what do you need to notice about the way you're doing this and about who you're being in this situation. So it is a lot of stopping to reflect on, wait, what am I doing? So imagine, if you will, I'll use the car analogy. If you drive a stick and you stall out, oh, what am I doing? Am I on the clutch? Oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? Right? So it's the same thing. Oh, I'm stalled out, or I'm in a conflict with another person. So I think your instinct to see it reflected back at by somebody else is 100% accurate. You can stop and say, wait, what's not working here?
Yeah,
what
so
did I learn?
Really being
and can I step something back? Can I unlearn something? So as they've started to put their notes into one place, a couple of them had really great observations, which was, well, I learned that you're always supposed to put your notes in Excel. Like, something as simple as that was stopping him from being in a bigger conversation about, let's make an easy notes repository for the project. Like, it's something that simple can be enough of a stop in our brains.
Yeah.
And I would add, Carla, for leaders, there's some excellent assessments out there. So the AQAI gives you a lot of information about yourself. I know when I read my report, I was like, very interesting. You know, and when we did them with each other, Jenny gave me hers, I gave her mine, and I said, do I do this? And she said, you do this all the time, right? So inviting people around you to tell you what your blind spots are and to verify for you that this is something you do and this is the impact you have, and being open to that 360 performance review, right? Creating the systems where you have the feedback loop coming back to you helps you unearth the things that you don't know you don't know.
Yeah, so be vulnerable a little bit and ask the questions and listen to the answer.
Right? Vulnerable,
we're easy
willing,
to say, oh,
honest.
that can't be me.
Yep. Yeah.
So I know that we're out of time. I think your words are extremely valuable, especially as we move into this new hybrid world with, you know, it's easy to create silos. It's easy to create distance, and to be able to have the right techniques to create that oneness is really important. So thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with us. And now it's on to the yellow tent. Let's have some fun.
Can I
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I add one more thing, which is Thursday at, I believe it's 11 o'clock, I'm facilitating a roundtable discussion where we're gonna dig into the AQAI assessment more. So if you'd like to join me, come on down and play. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder.